Hello, and welcome to the Genius of Entrepreneur, featuring Genius 100 visionary Uri Levine in conversation with Ambassador Ido Aharoni. I'm Uri Levine, CEO of Genius 100 Foundation, a global philanthropic community inspired by Einstein. On behalf of the extraordinary Genius 100 team, including co-founder Rami Kleinman and Chief Community Officer Helen Hatzis, thank you so much for making the time to join us, either for the first time or again today. Genius 100 Foundation brings together accomplished, compassionate minds to reimagine the future and improve our world. We're a North American-based nonprofit organization whose purpose is to provide funds and support to under-resourced humanitarian and environmental initiatives and NGOs in geographies around the globe. We are delighted and honored to see so many members of our community and so many fans of our very special guest, Uri Levine, joining us from around the world. And we want to give a special thank you to the Genius of series sponsor, BST Canada, and Ala Tanous, founding member of our community, president of Genius 100 Foundation Canada, and global G100 board member, for your generous and ongoing support. And now on to today's special event and a quick rundown of our program. Two extraordinary people from our community, Genius 100 visionary Uri Levine and Ambassador Ido Aharoni, will be in conversation. And here's where you come in. We will be fielding questions from the audience at the conclusion of the conversation. So please don't forget to submit questions via the Q&A option located within your Zoom panel. At the conclusion of the Q&A, I'll be back to close things out with some special announcements. Now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce two extraordinary accomplished people, Uri and Ido. In addition to being a Genius 100 visionary, Uri Levine is a two-time unicorn builder, or duocorn, who co-founded Waze and is a former investor and board member of Moovit. He is about to publish his first book, Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution, a handbook for entrepreneurs, in January of 2023. Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, stated in the foreword, "It should be a Bible for entrepreneurs." And stay tuned, you'll receive information for pre-sale at the conclusion of today's event. Uri's vision in building startups is to disrupt inefficient markets and improve under-functioning services. His book focuses on solving big problems that save consumers time and money while empowering them and changing the world for the better. In his many years in tech and innovation space, he has experienced failure, moderate success, and tremendous achievements. He's a graduate of Tel Aviv University and served in the Israeli Army in a special intelligence unit. He's on the board of trustees at Tel Aviv University and mentors young entrepreneurs at the Zell Entrepreneurship Program at Reichman University, IDC Herzliya. And then we have Ambassador Ido Aharoni. He serves as Global Ambassador and co-founder of Genius 100. He's a 25-year veteran of Israeli Foreign Service and Israel's longest-serving Consul General in New York and the tri-state area to date. He held that position with the rank of ambassador for 6 years, overseeing the operation of Israel's largest diplomatic mission worldwide. Academically, he's a global distinguished professor for international relations at New York University's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences and a member of the Board of Governors of Tel Aviv University. He's co-founder of Israel-based consultancy Emerson Rigby, co-founder and principal at British Israeli investment company EA2K, and a member of International Advisory Council of APCO Worldwide, Value Base, and the Libra Group. In addition, he serves as a global ambassador for Maccabi World Union, chairman of the Trinity Forum for New Diplomacy, and chairman of GMFF, one of Israel's leading film funds, and a very dear friend and colleague. Welcome, Uri and Ido.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Hillary, for this great introduction, and welcome, Uri. You're a legend. I just would like to, before we begin our conversation, just to acknowledge the presence of some excellent people, wonderful people that I see For example, Tony Aspler, a world-class wine connoisseur based in Canada, is on the call. My dear friend Avraham Kadar, who's an Israeli born American entrepreneur, just sold his company, Brain Pop. Congratulations, Avraham. I sent you a WhatsApp message. I see Lillian Schiller, philanthropist here. Lee Eagle, my colleague from NYU, is here. Joanna Landau, founder of Vibe Israel, is here. Deborah Trudeau from the World Women's International Forum from Quebec is here. My dear friend, producer Brett Burns is here. New York-based philanthropist Barbara Fix is here. And Amos Bigun, who's from London. Good to see you, Amos. Uri, I remember your speech in 2015 in Toronto. It was amazing. It was, you probably want to unmute yourself because I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you now. So
Okay.
We're so happy to have you again. So it's been 7 years that we haven't heard from you, but now we have you on this webinar. Hopefully we'll be able to use the video also to disseminate really the wisdom of what you have to say. And I was especially intrigued back then with how clearly your thought was about what makes a success in the world of high tech. But before we begin with talking about your book and about your career, tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, when I Googled up your name, I couldn't find any personal information. So tell us about your upbringing and so on.
So is that the good or bad that you haven't seen any personal information?
Well, I think it's probably a coincidence.
Okay, so I'm 57 years old, and I was raised and born in Israel. I born in Tel Aviv, and I went to school here in Tel Aviv and Ramat Sharon, and I was pretty much a troublemaker as a young boy and teenager, and then I went and spent 6 years at the Israeli military service in an intelligence unit. And after that, I started my career in the high tech. Right, so I was a software developer at the beginning, and I actually liked that quite a lot. And later on, I switched into more of product and business development and understanding users. And my first startup was when I was 35. So that was 22 years ago, and that ended up to be unsuccessful. Eventually, we started Waze in 2007, and that turned out to be very successful. In between, there were a few others that ended more or less successful. And I think that at the end of the day, this brought me into realizing that I can actually help a lot of entrepreneurs, right? So most of the people, when they will hear my name, they will think of an entrepreneur, but there is another pretty strong personality of me of being a teacher. And the result is that I can easily mentor multiple or other CEOs, and I feel equally rewarded if I build stuff myself or I have someone to be guided and build it at the same fashion. And that was maybe one of the keys for eventually writing my book, because
So before we get into the content of the book, which it will be published soon, right? In a couple of months or even less than that. I wanted to ask you, some people have a very clear memory of the moment they knew they wanted to do something in life, right? Some people say, this is the moment I knew I wanted to become a medical doctor. Was there such a moment for you?
1981, the first computer, the first home computer in that sense, Sinclair ZX 81. And I just realized that, wait a minute, I can actually write things and the computer is then execute them, and maybe I can do magic here. And so my desire, and look, this is way before there was personal computers at home, and that was the first home computer in that sense. And at the time, it has 1 kilobyte of memory, 1 kilobyte, right? So not 1 mega, not 1 giga, not 1 tera, 1 kilo.
Think about it, right?
It's
Those
unbelievable.
little devices have, yeah, oh my God.
And this is where I started to write code, and I realized that I actually like that. And then during my military service, I mostly wrote code. And after that as well.
You know, my first computer was Commodore 64, but I wasn't fortunate enough to connect with code writing. You know, one of the crowning achievements of our community, and you've been there from the very beginning, you're one of our early visionaries, along with your Waze co-founders. One of the crowning achievements is the fact that we were able to take an idea, which was to find the proper home for Albert Einstein's archives. And to those of us on this call who are first timers, the entire, raison d'etre of Genius 100 is to celebrate the legacy of Albert Einstein. And so now there's a museum being built in Jerusalem, thanks to the very generous donation of my dear friend, art collector Jose Mugrabi and his wife, Mary. And I just wanted to ask you if there was a moment in your upbringing, in your educational journey, in your entrepreneurial journey, where you thought about Einstein. Was he at all in the background of everything that you did?
You know, he is being part of each and every presentation that I'm carrying. And with a quote that, in my mind, it belonged to Einstein, but over time, people told me that he actually never said that. So, but I still will attribute that to him, and I cannot even ask him, right? So, this is about failures, right? And he basically said, if you haven't failed, that because you haven't tried anything new before, and if you are going to try new things, you will fail. And this is dramatic, right? Because startup journey is complex journey, and part of it is that it's a roller coaster journey, it's a long journey, but it's also a journey of failures. And if you are afraid to fail, then in reality you already failed. And this is where I'm definitely using Albert Einstein's quote in each and every presentation that I'm making.
Well, definitely, whether he said it or not, it makes perfect sense. And I think that that's what makes us unique here in Israel, is the fact that in Israel, you learn how to tolerate failure, not necessarily to celebrate it, but to tolerate it. Now, most of the startups fail. That's a reality, right? If there's a philosophical question here, if we are teaching young entrepreneurs how to, to avoid failure, it may, when I'm presenting this as a question, it may suppress their desire to continue, no?
So for a second, I would say, look, none of the entrepreneurs that ever start things that they're going to fail, right? And so obviously you go with a great passion to change the world. And essentially people that will go into this journey, it's for a second, I would say, think of the equation, right? On one hand, we have the passion for making an impact or making a change. And on the other hand, there is a combination of fear of failures plus the alternative costs, right? So what is it that they need to give up in order to go into this journey? When the passion is so much greater than the combinations of both, they will start a journey. And each and every entrepreneurs, they never imagine themselves as going to fail, right? In their mind, they are going into the right mission, and failure is not an option. And the good news is that you really need this attitude in order to go through the challenging period of this journey.
Now, what do you think is the reason why so many startups fail? I read somewhere that the main reason is that they did not do proper research, meaning they started a company in order to solve a problem that exists only in their minds. It's not a real problem. The market doesn't recognize that as a problem.
by and large, I would say this is a major reason that startups fail, right? So they haven't started with the problem. They have started with a solution, right? And in my mind, when you start, you need to think of a problem, a big problem, something that's actually worth solving, something that the world will become a better place if you solve that. And then you ask yourself, so who has this problem right now? If you are the only person that have this problem, then I can recommend you a pretty good shrink. But if a lot of people actually have this problem, then what you really want to do next is go and speak with those people and understand their perception of the problem. And only then go and build the solution. Now, if you follow this path and you're not going to give up throughout your journey, then you will end up with creating value. And when you create value, then there is the reason for your existence. If you don't create value, you will die.
And indeed, most startups, and even those who manage to go through the first 5 years, usually most of them don't survive the 10th year, which is an interesting phenomenon. Now, you are very big on equating the relationship between the entrepreneur and the idea, the problem, to a romantic relationships, right? You're using the examples of dating and falling in love. And so, right. So if you can expand on that a little bit, why did you choose that personal relationships example?
Number one, it's really easy to understand.
That's for sure.
And the reality, and this is look, I definitely compare going into this journey of building a startup into going into dating scene, right? And there are many ideas that you think of, and eventually there is one idea that you tell yourself, this is what I'm going to work on, right? And at the beginning, you only want to spend or compare that into the dating scene. So you go to many dates, and eventually there is one that you tell yourself she is the one, right? And at this phase, you only want to spend time with your date. You don't care about the rest of the world. The same with your idea, right? So you start to think about it from multiple perspectives. This is the problem I'm going to solve, and this is how the solution is going to look like, and these are the people that actually have this problem, and so forth, until you feel confident enough. And then you go and tell your friends, this is what I'm going to build. Now, the first reaction is always the same. This will never work. And these are the nice guys, right? Because Israelis, occasionally we tend to be less nice there and obviously less politically correct. And then you would hear, this is the stupidest idea that I ever heard.
Well, I'm very curious to hear about some of the negative. I'm interested because you mentioned that. What were some of the negative responses you and your colleagues received when you came up with the idea of Waze?
So look, Waze is revolutionary in its concept, right? Because we, the drivers, are crowdsourcing all the information that is being used by the application and serving the rest of the drivers, right? So to a certain extent, we are saying each and every one of us is helping the rest of the drivers to avoid traffic jams and speed traps and so forth. So by itself, it's a novel idea, right? So we, the people, are helping the rest of the people, and if we can have the entire world with this mindset, then we are going to have a better world. That concept did not resonate well. So when we told people this is going to be crowdsourced, they basically say, you know what, I'm never going to contribute anything, and therefore it will never work. Simple conclusions out of that. And it was a long while before the industry realized that this model is actually way better than any other model. And we heard that throughout the entire journey. When we discuss the concept of crowdsourcing with the industry, everyone told us this will never work, right? And the result is that eventually, when it does, it's like for a second, I want you to think of Wikipedia started 20 years ago. And 10 years ago, there was no Britannica. The same disruption happened with Waze. When we started at the beginning, we obviously struggled, but as soon as we started to take off, that was faster than the entire industry combined. And at the end of the day, there are no other navigation devices out there. There are merely no other applications out there. And when total disruption happens, the entire market equilibrium changes.
By the way, I happen to know the guy who owns Britannica, and he bought it right before Wikipedia launched. But it's interesting. What would you recommend for Waze competitors to do if they were in that position? Shall they also involve crowdsourcing, or what could be their future?
Crowdsourcing is a matter of philosophy, right? And you either believe in it or you don't. And there is no half-baked here. There is no in-between. There is no, let's use a little bit of that, because the essence of crowdsource is that you trust the community. And if you don't trust the community, then there is no community. And if you do, then that means that you change your mindset completely. And most of the existing map makers or traffic makers or in any other markets, when they think of crowdsourcing as an option, they say, yeah, let's use a little bit of that. There is no a little bit of that. There is either the whole 9 yards or nothing.
And that leads me to, I know that you guys prepared a nice little video about your book, which we'd like to play now with your permission. I know that Helen has this, has the video. So Helen, if we can play the video. Yeah. We need sound.
People know me mostly as the founder of Waze and an entrepreneur.
Uri Levine.
Uri Levine.
My journeys were always about creating value. And to an extent, I would say my destiny is about creating value. The book, Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution, is fulfilling that destiny. This book is about abstracting the way to build a startup and actually simplify it into different phases of the startup evolution. Each one of them is described in a way that will help you to increase the likelihood of being more successful. Many of those chapters are also relevant for all businesses in the world, like firing and hiring, understanding users, figuring out product market fit. Because at the end of the day, if you don't figure out product market fit, you will die. And this book is going to help you to figure that out. When I approached Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, for feedback, he told me, this is amazing. I wish I had that when I started. Then I realized that this is the real thing.
Well, that's a very nice video, and of course, if you have giants like Steve Wozniak, that's pretty impressive. Now, I remember from your speech in 2015 in Toronto, you said something that stuck with me. You said that the desire to have a perfect product is the biggest enemy, and you should, strive to get something that is good enough. So those who achieve perfection or try to achieve perfection usually are doomed to be eternally, frustrated.
You're right. It's at the end of the day, the good enough is going to win the market, and therefore the biggest enemy of good enough is perfect. You don't need to be perfect in order to win the market. And you can think of multiple of the winners throughout the history, and you will tell yourself, you know what, YouTube was actually less than at the time. There was a different competitor that was more accurate, but YouTube was good enough, and that was enough to win. Waze was good enough, and that was enough to win. Gmail, at the beginning, it was not even good enough, but then through iterations, a journey of failures and more iterations, it became good enough. And then once it became good enough and free, no one can compete with that. This is something that we need to remember. Free and good enough wins the market.
Combination of the two. Now, your book is about how to really dive into the problem, not to fall in love with the solution, meaning to have patience, not to jump to the end of the process, but to have patience. When you look at the problems that the human race is facing these days, where would you see, in your opinion, the main effort is going to be in the future?
So look, the beauty of solving problems is that you create value every step, right? And if you solve a big problem that a lot of people suffer from that, it's one thing. If you solve a smaller problem, it's a different thing. There are a lot of problems. The good news is that there are a lot of problems. The bad news is that there are a lot of problems, but at the end of the day, these problems are waiting for entrepreneurs to be addressed. And occasionally there are, Israel used to have drinking water problem. Not anymore, right? And many of the problems that we have seen over the years simply disappeared because of someone was looking at that and saying, "This is what I'm going to do." Now, to a certain extent, I would say the traffic jams and mobility is still a big problem. In fact, there are more traffic jams today than there were in 2007 when we started, and we had the mission to help drivers to avoid traffic jams. Over the years, I realized that what Waze did is way bigger than helping people to avoid traffic jams. It's becoming a tool for planning, and you can be on time in specific meetings, and it's empowered people to drive, people that otherwise were afraid to drive. And in my mind, the empowerment of people is way bigger value than saving them time on traffic jams.
So let's talk about traffic. What do you think is the next step in trying to ease because traffic is a social and economic menace, really. Traffic jams, you said, people, the productivity that is being lost every day is just, only today it took me an hour and a half to get from my office to my home, where it should take not more than 35 minutes. So what do you think that effort is heading the next 10, 20 years?
So this is one of the areas that we will actually need the help of the regulator. And let me for a second abstract the problem, right? And so just imagine any highway next to your house, right? So if you're in LA, maybe the 405 highway, and if you're in New York, then the Long Island Expressway, and anywhere there are major highways. And I want you to imagine at 9 a.m. in the morning, and imagine 1 mile of one lane, right? 1 lane, 1 mile of it. There are approximately 70 to 75 vehicles in this one mile. And in these 70 or 75 vehicles, there are about 80 people. 80 people occupying 1 mile. As long as we don't change the ratio between the number of passengers to the number of vehicles, we will be stuck in traffic. Now, in order to do that, we simply need to encourage carpool on one hand, public transportation in particular, because then we change the ratio dramatically. And for that, a lot of the authorities and the Ministry of Transportation and municipalities are looking at it, but they're all looking from their perspective and not the user perspective. The user perspective is very simple. Their choice of mobility is based on 3 parameters, by and large. So the first one is going to be convenient, the second one is speed, and the last one is cost. If I can build a public transportation system that is convenient, fast, and cheap, maybe even free, right? Because some places public transportation are actually free, then I would actually encourage people to make the right choice for them. And the result is that the right choice for all of us. Now, can we build something like that? Of course we can, but it requires making hard decisions. Because just imagine, and for a second, I would say, I'm not sure where you are based, but if you think of New York City, if you think of most of the cities in the US, they are built like grid, avenues and streets, and it's a grid-based, right? just imagine that you take every other street in every other avenues, and you make that only for public transportation and small size vehicles, right? So van size that are going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth constantly at a very high frequency. You end up with building a system that can take you from anywhere to anywhere. You end up with building a system that is very convenient because it's at worst, it's a block away. And it's definitely going to be so much faster than any other means of transportation. And the result is that you answer all the challenges for a person to make their mobility choice, and you drive them into making the right decision. And that right decision is going to take away traffic jams.
And do you said you need to work with the regulator. What are the main challenges of working with regulators? I'm sure that you had your share of regulator grief while developing Waze.
With Waze, we had very little issues with the regulators. There was a little bit of time that we were thinking that our business model is actually selling traffic information to municipalities, and therefore they can improve mobility within their municipality. But we ended up with it's very hard to work with regulators. They are slow movers and they have different agendas, and occasionally we don't get it in particular. So it's not them, it's us that don't get it. And we ended up with saying, we don't want that. It's too much of a mess. It's too complex. Let's do something else.
Now, Moovit also, which is another company that you were very critical in its evolution, Moovit also deals with the issue of transportation. So a lot of people claim that the solution to problem of traffic is everything that you said: increase the ratio of people per vehicle, reduce the size of the vehicle, reduce the distance between vehicle, and so on, but also incentives for people to use public transport. What do you think we need to do that we're not doing today in order to make that happen?
So remember that that the order of importance for most of the users is convenience, speed, cost, right? So cost is the third one, not the first one. If we address convenience and speed, then the rest will follow. Now, if you ask me what is the right price for public transportation, it should be free.
Should be free.
So it's subsidized everywhere, right? There is not even a single place where public transportation is not subsidized. Now, if it's subsidized by 70% or 80% or 100%, it's not a big of a difference. But in behavior, it is.
So your suggestion would be for the regulator, the first thing is to make it free.
No, that will be the third thing, right? The first thing is to think of the users, right? And look, at the end of the day, if you don't use public transportation today, the only way that I can convince you that you should use it is not when I will tell you it's free, right? You don't care that it's free. In order for you to switch to use public transportation, it needs to be way faster, or it needs to be so much more convenient than anything else, right? And by the way, sitting at the back seat and watching a video or working on your computer, it's way more convenient than driving your own car in a traffic jam.
Absolutely, absolutely. So other than promoting the book, what are you working on now?
So I have about a dozen of startups that I'm involved. Some of them I founded, some of them I invested, some of them I simply mentor the CEO or sitting on the board of directors. And each one of them is looking at a single problem and trying to address that, right? And so from Pontera, that is trying to help American to retire richer by helping them to optimize their 401k plans, and as a result retire richer, or Fairfly, which deals with the biggest secret in travel industry, and this is what happened to airfare after you book your flight. You don't know because you never compare prices after you make the reservation, but prices are going up and down all the time. They are going up and down before you're making the reservations and after you're making the reservation. And the result could be significant, right? And so if a corporate deploys FairFly, they can save 10% of their travel budget that goes directly to the bottom line, right? And so this turns out to be pretty significant.
So how do you don't share any secrets, but I'm just curious as a traveler myself, how do you find out this? Because I noticed that when I'm trying to book a flight and then I'm returning from the same URL, same computer to book the same flight, there's a price change. But when I go to another computer, it's a different story. So how do you detect that?
So we monitor the itinerary, right? And the specific itinerary, which makes it really easy to monitor, right? And then we will find that there are times of days that the prices are different. But at the end of the day, the entire approach of dynamic pricing is based on demand and time before the event, right? And because we all realize that that the ticket to a show the day after the show worth absolutely nothing, right? And so in a second before that, they might be very cheap if they are still available, right? And so the most significant part of the dynamic pricing algorithm is based on the demand and the time before the event. And so monitoring over time, over a long period of time, is actually between now and the time of the flight, or between now and the time of the event, is likely going to give you find the places that the price is lower than before, and then you can rebook the same flight or the same tickets or whatever it is.
Now we have some questions from the audience, and I'd like to begin with a question from our dear friend Tony Aspler. Tony Aspler is one of the most famous wine connoisseurs in the world. He just was in Israel recently. We hosted him for dinner in Jerusalem, hosted by Chef Ezra Kedem, who's a very well-known chef. And I'm happy to report, I know Joanna here on the call will be happy to hear that Tony loved Israeli wine. And but he has a question for you that comes in the world of creativity. And he's quoting Edward de Bono, who's the big guru of creativity, who coined the term lateral thinking. And basically he's asking if you're a big fan of lateral thinking, that puts an emphasis on random thinking and so on, in order to come up with solutions.
So for a second, I would say my focus is usually on the problem, and then as soon as I would tell myself this is a problem that it's worth looking into it, then the focus shifts into the people, and I want to understand how painful of a problem it is for them, and only then I basically say, okay, it's worthwhile to try to address that. So it's sort of a linear thought process to capture the order of magnitude of the problem, right? Or in particular, the perception of the problem. So how many people or how many organizations actually suffer from this problem on one hand, and at the same time, how painful is it for them?
And that's a perfect segue to the next question, which comes from our friend Barbara Fix. Barbara Fix is a New York-based philanthropist born in South Africa, who has been very innovative in her philanthropy. She supported, for example, dogs in military, making sure that their well-being is taken care of. So Barbara is a wonderful human being, and she has a two-part question. The first is, how did the first spark of the idea / problem of traffic issues changed along the way? So you started from the beginning with knowing it's going to be crowdsourcing as the solution, or it evolved?
Sorry. So that was the spark, right? So the reality that and this is 2006, and we were with our family in Metula for Rosh Hashanah vacation, and we were 10 different families there. You know, when it was time to go back home, at the time we had 4 little kids, and obviously it took us longer than anyone else to get them all into the car and start driving. And back then, there were only two alternative routes going from Metula back to Tel Aviv. And I called up all the other drivers trying to figure out what is traffic like on their route. And based on that, I realized that I should take Wadi Ara and not Wadi Milek, so one route other than the other one. And and I realized that the only thing that I need is someone ahead of me on the road. And that magical part, the realization that there is someone that knows exactly what I want to know right now, and I don't even care what's the name of this person, right? As long as they are willing to share that information with me, was the trigger event. So that was one part. At the same time, Ehud Shabtai, that later on became the CTO of Waze, he figured out a way that we, the drivers, can actually create the map as we drive. Because when you drive someplace, we look at the GPS trace, and we can basically say this is a road, right? And if there are, and if you take these GPS traces from a lot of drivers, and you figure out what's the difference between a main road and a street, or if there is an intersection that no one is making left turn, then no left turn is allowed, right? If there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and there is no one else coming the other direction, that is one-way street, right? And if there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and there are only two driving the other direction, this is one-way street in Tel Aviv, right? And so we and we basically merge these two concepts into building Waze. And the magic of the crowdsource is we can gather automatically most of the crowdsource, right? So when you drive, we know where you are and we know how fast you are going, and based on that, we know if there is traffic jams there or not. And the only thing that we don't know is who you are, because we don't care.
Barbara's second question is a very, very interesting question. She's looking at it again from the perspective of a creative person. Every time I've seen Paul McCartney being interviewed either by Stephen Colbert they always ask him, tell us, do you still have ideas for new songs all the time? So Barbara's asking you the same question, just change Paul McCartney with Uri Levine. She wants to know if you still have ideas coming up all the time for solutions, problems, and how frequently you deal with those visions.
Every day.
Every day. That's amazing. That's good to know. That's good to know. People like you really make the difference.
And by and large, I would say right now I'm busy with a dozen startups and my book, and I'm too busy to actually create new startups. But next year is a different story, right? And next year is just around the corner.
Now, are you a big fan of when you're dealing with young entrepreneurs? I have to say, as an Israeli diplomat, I can't even tell you how many young entrepreneurs came to my office, whether I was in LA or in New York, and many of them, for lack of a better word, I would say, were overly self-confident. What do you do with that? Is that a problem? Do you think it's a positive thing, or how do you deal with that when you're dealing with young entrepreneurs? I love, treating them the same way you treat talent, because I do believe that they should be treated like talent. They're creative people. But the question is, if there's too much self-confidence, if it does not become a detriment.
So I want you to think of the following, right? And the self-confidence here is actually very important, because building a startup is a journey of failures. You're going to try multiple things, right? And if you accept that, then the faster that you will fail, you actually have enough time for another attempt and another attempt and another attempt. And this is going to be throughout each and every journey of building the startup. For each one of those attempts, I want you to have the conviction that this is going to work. And that conviction is what you might be referring to as an overconfident. And in my mind, I would say, no, this is the conviction that is needed in order to go and try the next one, and the 7th one, and the 15th one, with the same passion and the same conviction as the first one. And that's what I would like to see. I would like to see the same level of energy throughout the entire journey, in the realization that if you fail today, that doesn't say anything about tomorrow. And tomorrow is the first day of the rest of your life.
So we have another excellent question from a fellow member of the community, Olga Batjin, who's in Pasadena, California, and she herself is an entrepreneur. Her company's name is Lucinetic, and her husband Konstantin is a visionary and a musician and a physicist, and it's a terrific couple. And she's asking, what are the best questions the founders of your supported startups ask you? That's an excellent question. And what do you love doing most with your founders? And I suspect that Olga is asking because she is a founder.
So I think that I've created a very powerful, for a second time, we call that CEO support system, because CEO is very lonely position, right? You have no one to share with your challenges, your real challenges, and your real frustrations and your real issues. And because you cannot do that with the board, you sometimes cannot do that with the other founders, because either they're gonna get scared or they are the issue. And for that, the other CEO community that I've created across my startups turns out to be the most powerful things for the other startups, because then you can discuss that with other people like you that face similar challenges, and have their own perspectives of how they dealt with similar issues. And I think that at the end of the day, the support system for the CEO is critical. And if you can find that with someone that is going to guide you, with someone that was in this position before, someone that can be there for you when you need it, then this is going to be the most significant part of the most significant value that you can get.
Now we have one last question from Yair Kreitman, and the question is about the automotive industry and the car segment of the market. He's asking, why is it so difficult to enter the market, to penetrate the market, no matter which angle, when it comes to vehicles and transportation and mass transportation? And I don't know if you haven't answered that question. It's a very general question.
The funny part is that when you speak with founders of different, or CEOs of different startups, each one of them is going to tell you the same thing, right? My market is the hardest market to penetrate, right? And if you are in the mobility space, this is exactly what you're going to do. And then you basically say, you know what, I'm going to build something in the insurance space. And they will tell you, you know what, going into the insurance market is the slowest moving market of all. And this is a nightmare to go there, right? And if you'll go into someone that is building a medical device, they will tell you, wait a minute, you have no clue, right? Building a medical device is going to take you ages to get there, right? And so each one of us is looking at their own problem and want to believe that this is the hardest part, and someone else has their problems are way easier, right? Guess what? All the problems are hard.
All the problems are hard, including transportation and automotive. Well, Uri, I must tell you, this not only has been a pleasure for me personally to talk to you again, but I think that we assembled a very impressive group of people that learned from you. You certainly enriched our lives. I hope that this is not the last time that we're engaging with you in our lovely community. You've been an integral part of it from the very beginning. And I'd like to mention the fact that there's a possibility for us to pre-order the book, which we will certainly do. And with that, Uri, thank you so much. I'd like to turn this over back to Hillary, the CEO of the Genius 100 Foundations. Hillary, the floor is yours. Uri, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much to both of you. It was absolutely extraordinary to listen to the two of you just talk to one another and learn from each other. And, what an insightful and relevant conversation. And I'm sure everyone got so much out of it. And thank you again to Uri and Ido for your time today. Just a few quick announcements before we head out for the day. One is Cabo returns for those of you who have experienced a G100 summit. You know how special it is. So we're back. The 2023 summit is set for February 2nd through 5th in Cabo, Esperanza. For more information, just let us know. We're filling up quickly, which is a wonderful sign. For our next Genius Up, please join us on Thursday, December 8th for the Genius of Art with Genius 100 visionary Tiffany Schlain for a private virtual tour of her exhibition, Human Nature. Art Basel is coming up quickly. For those of you planning to attend the events and festivities in Miami, please be in touch with us as we'll be out and about and would be delighted to have you join us at some of the events that we'll be attending. And the holidays are right around the corner. So a wonderful idea for that is our Gift of Sight campaign. If you haven't yet participated, please help us achieve our goal of providing 1,000 more sight-saving surgeries. Please go to genius100visions.com and donate if you can. For every $125 raised, a surgery can be performed and save someone's sight. If you enjoy our programming, please consider hopping on again to Genius 100 Visions and join our mailing list. Thank you again to Uri and Ido and Helen, who operates everything behind the scenes here today. And for those of you who celebrate, happy Thanksgiving. I hope it's a blessed one. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.